Hello and welcome to Neat Hrania YouTube channel. You're watching another episode of the Game in a Nutshell series designed for explaining the wargame rules. My name is Branislav Berec, and in this video we're going to learn how to play Rail Line, a game by Martin Doležal published by Albi, who have also sponsored the video. It's a game for 2 to 3 players only, plays in about 20 minutes, and the recommended age is 8 years or more. So let's get started. Before we set the game up, let's take a look at how it may look like when the game ends. Players are going to build these 3 tracks from this starting station card, going in this direction towards this end station or the final station card. There are 4 curve cards in these positions, and there are exactly 8 cards between these outer columns. So to set the game up, place the starting station card here, the end station card here, 4 curve cards like this in these positions, and leave the space for 8 cards in between. Give each player 1 record sheet, 2 locomotives of the same color, 1 pencil, randomly determine the starting player who will get this first player card, and that player decides which side of this starting station card will be used. Then sort these railway cards by their back and deal 4 cards from the A deck to each player. You may look at these cards and keep these cards hidden from other players. Then take the deck B, place it somewhere next to the play area, and reveal 4 cards face up. This is the general card offer. Then starting with the first player and continuing clockwise, each player chooses one of these tracks and places both of their locomotives on that track. Then note the symbol on that track and mark the same symbol on your record sheet to indicate that you have already acquired one of those symbols. Then other players do the same. You can only choose an empty track and again mark the symbol on your record sheet. With that, the setup is complete. In Rail Line, players will build rail lines using the cards from the general offer or from their hand. For each of these symbols you connect to your rail line, mark the corresponding symbols on your record sheet, and at the end of the game, the player with the highest sum of these victory points is the winner. The game is played in turns, starting with the first player and then continuing clockwise until the game ends. On your turn, you have to choose 1 card from your hand or from this card offer and add it to the existing rail line. You must keep this orientation of the card, you may never rotate it, and after you add that card, all players move one of their locomotives, the one which is further ahead, to the end of the railway track, like this, and mark all the symbols along the way. So here we have another male symbol, and then the blue player does the same. When you decide to use the card from your hand, you don't draw any additional cards, your hand will never be replenished. When you take the card from this offer, always replenish it with a new card from the top of the deck. It may happen that when you move your locomotive, there is no symbol on that track. In that case, you don't mark anything on your record sheet, while other players may have some symbols on their line. On the other hand, you may have more than 1 symbol on your line. In that case, mark both of those symbols or all the symbols. So here we have the passenger and also the glassworks. And when you mark all spaces in 1 row and you would gain another symbol in that row, instead of marking a symbol, you simply gain a coin. So circle a coin or somehow mark the coin here. Later in the game, when you use that coin, for example, for these type of effects here, simply cross that coin to indicate that you have paid that coin. One additional note, at the end of this row, if you gain another symbol, you gain 2 coins instead of 1. Then you can optionally perform one of these 4 optional actions. So after you place the card and move the locomotives and mark the corresponding symbols, with this one you have to spend a coin, which means you must have a coin available. And if you do, when you spend that coin, you may move your locomotive which is further behind. In our example, it would be this locomotive. You can move it any number of spaces or any number of cards and mark the symbol where you end your movement. So you skip all the symbols which you pass over. You can actually move your second locomotive to the space where your first locomotive is located now. If you end your movement on the card or on the space with more than one symbol, you only choose one of those symbols, not both. If you use this action, again you have to spend a coin, and then you can play another railway card from your hand or from the card draw. You add the card, move the locomotives, mark the symbols as usual. With this optional action, you may simply discard one of your A cards from your hand and gain one coin. Finally, the fourth optional action is this one. You have to spend 2 coins and then you can gain one symbol of your choice. So, for example, here we have males. We would mark this symbol, and you can only perform this optional action once per game. When you do, mark this space to indicate that you can no longer use that optional action. And remember, even though there are 4 optional actions here, you can only choose one optional action per turn. There's one more area here on the record sheet which we have not talked about yet. It only applies to 3-player games. When the new card is played and you gain the symbol which you don't want at the moment or you don't need, then instead of gaining that symbol, you simply gain a coin which you mark here in this area, and the coins here in this area count in the exact same way as these coins. You're only limited to 4 coins you can gain this way in a 3-player game. When you add the last card in a row and you move the locomotives and mark the symbols on your way, move the locomotives further down the line, and as you do it, your locomotives cross this symbol, which means you gain this action for free. You don't have to pay a coin for it. You may move your second locomotive to any space, any symbol you want, and gain that symbol. The game ends when this last card is played and players move their locomotives and mark their symbols, or the end of the game is triggered when someone plays a card from the display and the draw deck runs out. In that case, finish the current round so that all players have the same number of turns, and then the game ends. One way or another, when the game ends, starting with the first player, all players may perform one final optional action, except for playing a second railway card. So you may choose one of these 3 options, and then proceed to final scoring. There are 2 types of record sheets. They are marked with this number. This is the first variant. The second variant is on the other side. I'll come to that in a minute. So let's take a look at how all the scores are calculated. For the first row, which is the number of passengers, simply get the number of points in the last marked space. Here we have 5, so that would be 5 victory points. However, if you are the player with the highest number of passengers, you can double that amount, so it would be 10. In case of a tie, players don't get this double bonus. Then the second row has the same rules, so mark the highest number of victory points you see. Here we have 2. Then these next 4 rows represent the industrial sector. In the first row we have coal, then we have iron ore, then we have steel and the factory. For each of these boxes, in order to count them, all the boxes above must be also marked. So in our example, for the iron ore, we have 1 victory point because the box above is also marked. So this would be 1 victory point. These 2 victory points also count because this one and this one are also marked, and this 3 victory point space also counts because all of these boxes are marked. However, this box doesn't count, obviously, because it's not marked, and this box doesn't count neither because this one is not marked. It doesn't matter that this one is, but this box is not marked, which means none of these boxes actually count. That means for this one, it will be only 2 victory points, and for this one, only 3 victory points. Looking at the coal, here we have 6 victory points. Now, coming to forest and sawmill, you simply multiply these two numbers. Here we have 3 multiplied by 2, that is 6 victory points. Then we have sugar beet and sugar factory. For sugar beets, you don't score any victory points. You only score victory points for the boxes for the sugar factory if the corresponding box above is marked as well. So here for the sugar factory, we only have 8 victory points. And then the glass works. Here we have increasing number of victory points and then they're moving down. So when you cross those symbols, you actually lose some victory points there. Then if you have any remaining coins, for each one you score 1 victory point and then sum up all the numbers, and then the player with the most victory points is the winner. Now let's take a look at the second variant, which is more challenging than the first one. First of all, for passengers, you score negative number of victory points. That's because historically, when the rail lines were introduced, the passenger cars were actually not profitable. They were losing money, but when they added mail cars, these were profitable. So this system works in the exact same way as on the previous side. So for example, in order to have these 22 victory points, all these spaces must be marked. And again, always look at the last one. So here you would lose 6 victory points for passengers, but then you would gain 22 victory points for mail. Industrial block works in the exact same way as in the first variant, with one small difference. When you mark all spaces in one column, you immediately gain 1 coin. Then forest and sawmill work in a slightly different way. When you mark these spaces, let's say like this, and we end up with this one, in order for the box to count, the box underneath or above needs to be marked as well. So in this situation, these 3 victory points count because this box above is marked. So that would be 3 victory points here. However, these 8 victory points don't count. This one is not marked. Only these 4 victory points are marked. So that would be 4 points. Then for sugar beet and sugar factory, the sugar factory spaces unlock the spaces in the next section. So when you start the game, you can mark these spaces easily, but you cannot continue here because the factory here is not marked. Once you mark it, you can continue marking these spaces, but not continue any further. Once you mark additional factory, then you can continue marking these spaces and so on. At the end of the game, you simply count the victory points. Here we have 9 points and here we have 2. And for the glass works, you will simply mark the victory points, and then if you are the first player to mark the last space, you mark 8 victory points. All other players later in the game can only mark the 4 victory points. If 2 or more players reach this last space in the same turn, then they both mark 8 victory points. And finally, the factory here. The factory awards you with additional victory points for all the remaining coins at the end of the game. Here, this first space is actually not the space you mark. You start marking the spaces here. And let's say we will end up with this one. And let's say we have 5 coins available at the end of the game. Now, this bonus says that you can take 3 of your remaining coins and gain 3 victory points for each. So 1, 2, 3 of them will be crossed and you score 9 victory points. For all the remaining coins, you simply score 1 point. So we would gain 3, 6, 9, 10, 11 victory points there. So that's how you play Rail Line. If you have any questions or comments, I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. If you like the series, please subscribe. You can also support the channel on the Patreon page. You've been watching Game in a Nutshell. My name is Branislav Berec and hope to see you next time.